but that he pledged allegiance to Sheikh Ahmadu Bamba before his death. He did so in the arms of Bamba, who then offered appropriate prayers and rites, and even composed an ode on behalf of Samori Touré, as Wolof poet Musaka writes. He, Bamba, journeyed on to Brazzaville and then to Sao Tome. That is where he met Samori, and people were shouting, "Well, what?" That is when Demba Ndiaye met Samori, in the company of Biran Sise, resembling the people of the trench. So if you study the Quran in the chapter called Buruj, you will understand the story of the trench. They visited Sheikh Bamba and gathered their souls, which, while in big tears, they entrusted to Bamba. The same day, Samori entrusted his son to Bamba. His name is Ahmadu Samori, together with his mother. Saranke is the name of his mother. She met with Bamba. Their tombs are still there on the outskirts of Mayumba. In contrast to Samori Touré's deadly sickness, Musaka suggests in the lines above and in another poem that Samori Touré and Biran Sise were burnt in a firing oven, in the same manner as the people of the trench called Ashab al-Uhdud, mentioned in the Quran. According to Muslim commentators, the Ashab al-Uhdud, also known as the martyrs of Najran, were burnt in the ditches only because of their belief in God. Stories about Bamba's bond with Samori Touré explain why one sometimes sees Samori's portrait in contemporary graffiti in Dakar. Now I'm going to discuss what is Sufism and why the poetry of Bamba. Once announced, the decision to exile Bamba incited great dissatisfaction among the Murid disciples. They feared that their Sufi master would not make it back home, so they recommended that he resort to the sword and gun in order to establish the truth and superiority of his religion. Sheikh Ahmadu Bamba not only wished for his exile to take place as expressed in one of his poems entitled Mukhaddimat al-Khitma, but he had a vision of his return from exile. Bamba anticipated his exile in the Qasida entitled Asiru Mahal Abrari, composed in the very year of his expatriation. So he says, "The enemies of Allah believed during the moment of my solitude that I was their prisoner. They were wrong. They are all unbelievers, prisoners of Satan and of their own pleasure. As for me, I walk towards Allah, possessor of the heavenly seat, the most grand." To better understand the poetry of Sheikh Ahmadu Bamba, one needs to accept first and foremost the centrality of the sacred texts of the Quran and the Arabic language to his poetry and to Sufi poetry in general. According to Philip Hitti, the Quran is not only the basis of the religion, the canon of ethical and moral life, but also the textbook in which the Muslim begins his or her study of language, science, theology, and jurisprudence. Its literary influence has been incalculable and enduring. The first prose book in Arabic, it set the style for future products. It kept the language uniform. Despite a diversity of ideology, Sufi poetry cannot be dissociated from the religion, since its guiding principles and moral values are informed by the Quran. Besides implementing the will of God, known as Sharia or the exoteric path of Islam, Sufism adds an esoteric path leading to the intimate knowledge and devotional love of God, as William Stoddard observed. Sheikh Ahmadu Bamba's Qasaid are the reenactment of the prescription of the Holy Book in the image of the Prophet Muhammad. Endowed with some measure of light and mental energy, the poet always expressed his intention to fully apply himself in the service of the Prophet. This is the origin of his sobriquet, Khadimul Rasul, meaning the servant of the messenger. The Qasaid known to the Murid collective consciousness as the poems of the sea, they usually say Yonu Gejga, reflect the spiritual warfare Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba undertook to fight the French cultural control of the Senegalese community. In most of these poems written during his exile in Gabon, Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba denounced the injustices and atrocities he endured under colonial oppression. Yet, it is hard to find verses in which the poet describes in detail the numerous incidences of coercion or physical and mental suffering the French colonial administration inflicted on him in an attempt to compel him to yield information or make a confession favorable to their socio-political objectives. In all of his poetic enterprise, Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba's panegyrics are devoted to praising the Prophet Muhammad, but they ultimately invoke the greatest authority in the name of Allah. In appropriating the esoteric language of the Quran to his mystic experience, Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba distances himself from graphic descriptions and concrete evocations of events. His Qasaid register a series of personal experiences, often expressed in a metaphorical language that is beyond ordinary human perception. This discursive feature of elusive and symbolic expressionism, it seems, is notable in the writings of all Sufi poets. As Trimingham points out, the mystic speaks the imaginative language of vision, symbol, and myth through which he can express truth beyond the reach of moral theology. And another Ibn al-Arabi talks about the same. Thus, it is no surprise that the Qasaid of Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba operate within a Gnostic system of reference, clothing his thoughts in cryptic language in which the use of words is predominantly metaphoric. In some of the Qasaid written before and during exile, Bamba, yes. Okay, I have 5 minutes, so I will skip some of these. So I wanted to talk about the Sufi concept of the perfect man. What makes Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba the perfect man, n'est-ce pas? Donc, the Sufi concept of the perfect man was initially founded, expressed in the writings of Ibn al-Arabi's theological manual called the Bezels of Wisdom, and further expounded in Abdul Karim al-Jili's Al-Insan al-Kamil, which serve as a powerful commendation of Sufi activity. In al-Jili's theology, the perfect man is one who, after craving for the greatest knowledge, comes to know God and his actions, and subsequently mirrors from within the divine attributes of essence, beauty, majesty, and perfection in order to achieve his oneness with God. Following the pattern of creation of Adam in the image and attributes of God, as narrated in the Quran and the Hadith, Al-Jili envisions the prophets and the chosen saints to develop the full potentiality of divine reality. So, therefore, thus, let me skip again. So there are analogous references in Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba's poems that induce the reader to accept that he met with the Prophet Muhammad, who then manifested himself through him and enjoined him to perform a spiritual jihad by way of the purification of the nafs. So the nafs is the ego. So when I go on explaining, there are 3 stages of the nafs for the purification of the soul, and that even those steps, Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba might have gone through that, but for a person who claims he made no sins during his life, he didn't have to go through that to become the perfect man that the Sufi are talking about. So I conclude here. Shah Ahmadu Bamba fully submitted to Allah and to the Prophet Muhammad and was, by virtue of his conduct, consecrated by the Prophet Muhammad as the Khutb Zamanihi, the axis of his age, to whom no favor is denied. And he said, thanks to the Quran, I have come close to the Lord. I have gained control of my soul, thus I have alienated the cursed one. Thus, by way of compensation to service well rendered, God, according to poet Musaka, assigned Shah Ahmadu Bamba the erection of 2 mosques as sign of his overflowing grace. So Musaka writes, you will build 2 mosques in your country. Very soon you will return to energize the congregation. You will build a great mosque in Jurbel. No one will uproot it. No one will pray faltering. You will build a great mosque in Touba. Very soon you will return to Darussalam and Touba. In 1902, the French administration released and returned Shah Ahmadu Bamba to Senegal. In June 1903, Shah Ahmadu Bamba was arrested again, exiled to Mauritania. In 1907, the administration gave authorization for Bamba to return to Senegal, but made sure he lived under surveillance in the village of Cheen Jolof. Finally, in January 1912, Shah Ahmadu Bamba was allowed to return to his native land of Baol, but was still under the close watch of the colonial administration until his death in 1927. Shah Ahmadu Bamba's return from his 7-year exile was enthusiastically received by the Murid faithful as the ultimate coronation of suffering. Bamba broke through the tyranny of opinion with the strength of his moral character and the eminence of his thoughts. Thus, his body of poetic work was read as a paean to injustice. A steady light of glory continues to shine over him as Murids recognize him far and wide as their charismatic sheikh, endowed with a prophetic aura. A Grand Magal, meaning a pilgrimage, is held annually on the 18th day of the month of Safar by the Murid community in the holy city of Touba in celebration of the date Shah Ahmadu Bamba departed for Gabon. This commemorative date was decided by the second Murid Khalif, Fallou Mbacké, asking the Murids to remember the weight of suppression bearing down upon Bamba's shoulder during his exile in Gabon for the redemption of his people. Shah Ahmadu Bamba himself illustrated this pain of isolation for the spiritual redemption of his people in a statement made to his family before he was invited to leave his homeland. For you will ascend in delight to Allah's heavens. You will be amid those in Allah's heavens. As for me, Bamba, in solitude, trials and tribulation and pains I will ascend. I'm going to Galwa, meaning Gabon. Thus, Shah Ahmadu Bamba's exile is celebrated by the Murids as a triumph of love in the image of the prophets who substituted themselves voluntarily as victims in order to respect the divine life of their peoples. Under the weight of his burden, Bamba taught the Murids the strength to bear their trials with self-restraint. The Grand Magal then is the moment when Murid faithful around the world congregate around the great mosque of Touba and rejoice over the triumph of their order. It is compulsory that the faithful make a visitation to Bamba's blessed tomb. There they make offerings seeking Bamba's intercession on Judgment Day. Most then will visit the lieux de mémoire, such as the cemetery and the mausolea of the caliphs. The Grand Magal, as Mamadou Diouf puts it, repeats the community's memory and actualizes its mission, rejecting permanent establishment elsewhere as improbable. So I will stop here, and if you have questions, if this is too long. Let's see. Thank you so much. Okay, yeah.
So thank you so much, Dr. Kamara, for your deep and enlightening talk. Now I will just open it to the floor for questions or comments. Do you have any question before you go? Any question for Dr. Kamara?
alhamdulillah ñuy sant fii Cheikh Bamba tey ngir moo taxaw julli woon fa Ndar bañu sañ ko tey.
Jonathan? Professor Fenderson? Monique? Jibi? Any question for Professor Kamara? All my freshmen. Yes. Oh, I should not go. Go ahead. Yes. Yeah. So you can sit down.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Okay. Oh my gosh. How do you do that? Okay. You can sit down.
Yes, sir.
All right. Go ahead.
Are there any poets or writers in the other Francophone countries who had a similar sort of impact?
I didn't hear the question. Samba.
Are there any
poets or writers in the other Francophone African countries who had a similar impact, or is Bamba very unique in that aspect of his legacy?
Yes, you see the poets, the writers that we all know in Francophone Africa write in French. And so we thought when we were going to school that, for example, the Negritude movement, which talk about the revival of Africanity, and were the best poets because they were written by great scholars like Léopold Sédar Senghor, Aimé Césaire, David Job, and we forgot that poetry was written in Arabic way before, maybe 50 years before, because when Cheikh Ahmadou Bamba started writing, it was in the late 1900s. And we knew about the Negritude movement in the 1930s and 1940s. So we all grew up thinking that, okay, the best way to speak against the French about their system, their colonial system, is to use the French language. Whereas people were writing in Wolof, they were writing in Arabic, and that writing was a writing of resistance against the colonial power. So that today, the awakening of the Senegalese community, whether they belong to one order or the other, like the Tijani or the Murid, is to say, well, let's go back to the writing of Cheikh Ahmadou Bamba and see what he has to say. But in my book, what I'm trying to prove is that not only Cheikh Ahmadou Bamba, if you take all the Sufi writers, because sometimes you hear about Omar Khayyam, only one book. You hear about Al-Ghazali, yes, the great philosopher. And yet Bamba usually conclude and say, I know of all their writings, but if you learn from my writing, you see something that goes far beyond. And then this needs to be exploited. It does not, we don't need to say Bamba was miraculous. We need to back it up with writings emanating from all the other Sufi scholars, from the Persian region, and then from the Quran and the Hadith that were the revelation or the statements of the Prophet Muhammad. And that's what I'm trying to initiate here and allow, like there have been perhaps 1,000 PhD dissertation on Shakespeare, why not on Cheikh Ahmadou Bamba? And everybody can find some reality about these writings, which are so much, so weightful that anybody can learn something. You don't need to be Christian or Muslim. You need to learn. This is scholarship. This is not writing taken from the heaven. No. Cheikh Ahmadou Bamba relied on all the great scholars that came before him. And then he studied their writings. He found some faults with some of them. He amended other writings, like even those of the scholars that came before him, and said, read my books and make sure that the color of my skin does not make you move away from it, because knowledge can come from any source. Yes?
Thank you. Any other question? Any other question or comment? All right.
Alaikum salam.
Sufism, is that the same thing that we're talking about? Sufism? Sufism?
Yes.
That's the same thing.
Yeah, that's the same thing.
And that is a part of Islam?
Yes. That is the
Welcome, brother.
distinction. That's the distinction that I mentioned here. Sufism is like the esoteric path to Islam. And then we say the Sharia is the exoteric path to Islam. And many commentators believe that the combination of the esoterics, that is, reading the Quran, reciting it, making prayers, is important. But if you go deep into the study of Prophet Muhammad in the Quran and the Hadith, you find truth that goes, or some type of divinity that goes beyond praying and fasting. And that's what Sufism is about. It's called mysticism or theological. They call it theosophy, not saying philosophy. Because sometimes when you use the word philosophy, they think about Neoplatonism, like Western philosophy that kind of talk about anything that has to be rational. Whereas Sufism tries to go beyond the rational and said there are some truth that somebody can achieve, n'est-ce pas? So, I'm speaking French, I'm sorry about that. That somebody can grasp without having to go through the Neoplatonic way of thinking.
Is the origin of Sufism?
Yes.
Is that anything related to the building of the pyramids?
The
The
building
pyramids
of the
were called Sufi, Cheops.
I don't understand the question. Oh, no, it has nothing to do with that. No, you're talking about Egyptian Egyptology?
Yes,
No, it has nothing to do with that.
yes.
No,
But they
sir.
were called Sufi, or the people that worshipped were called Sufi.
The Sufi worship God too. They don't worship like deities. Whereas if you're talking about the Egyptian pyramids, if that's what I understood, it's kind of different. Yeah, it's not called Sufism. Yeah.
Chuka,
And
thank
later
you.
we have Sheikh Sufi here. Probably he can help later, right? Or he's here, he can help a little bit with this question. Right? Now, I will show you a 7-minute video on Quranic schools in Touba. That's a film made by Sid Abdulaziz, who is here. And freshmen, you can go if you want. It's almost time to go. All right? So thank you for coming. And you have exhibitions there. You can just get a look. Okay? Probably maybe we can help you with that question. Right? Yes. So yeah, can you help me with that? With that address? Why you show them Huh? Okay. No, this program, they have a class. So they have to leave. Okay? Yeah. So take this.
mi ngi online mën naa YouTube la mais amagul kii xanaa ma jox la kii bi ma sànni link bi connecté bi ne amul solo yónni la ko ci kii bi ci Facebook bi ma jabal la Sana sant nañu bu baax. man sant nañu bu baax jërëjëf.
léegi Sana kan na la yóbbu.
Xaw ma yow yaa xam ne
waaw après ñu génn léegi we have to wait a little bit like 5 minutes.
il faut dans la yónnee ay affaire
5 minutes. Ok. Ok.
ma kii Samba ma lancé ko wala. ma lancé ko.
non xaaral tuuti étudiants yaa ngi ñëw.
ok d'accord
parce que dañu am ñaari classes yu ñëw.
ok d'accord
just 5 minutes.
d'accord.
ok.
yónnee naa ko waaw baax na jërëjëf Samba jërëjëf. non non garaaw mën naa ko kii yónnee naa la ko gis nga. I heard a lot about you. léegi kon mën naa la présenter noonu rek yow nga présenter après nga lire sa affaire before we be short 5 more minutes.
alhamdulillah ñuy sant fii Cheikh Bamba tey ngir moo taxaw julli woon fa Ndar bañu sañ ko tey alhamdulillah ñuy sant fii Cheikh Bamba tey ngir moo taxaw julli woon fa Ndar bañu sañ ko tey laajal France Maroc woon ba jëkk tanan nu xool leen Sëriñ Tuubaa da ngeen ko ñàkk alhamdulillah ñuy sant fii Cheikh Bamba tey ngir moo taxaw julli woon fa Ndar bañu sañ ko tey alhamdulillah ñuy sant fii Cheikh Bamba tey ngir moo taxaw julli woon fa Ndar bañu sañ ko tey laajal France Maroc woon ba jëkk tanan nu xool leen Sëriñ Tuubaa da ngeen ko ñàkk alhamdulillah ñuy sant fii Cheikh Bamba tey ngir moo taxaw julli woon fa Ndar bañu sañ ko tey alhamdulillah ñuy sant fii Cheikh Bamba tey ngir moo taxaw julli woon fa Ndar bañu sañ ko tey laajal France Maroc woon ba jëkk tanan nu xool leen Sëriñ Tuubaa da ngeen ko ñàkk alhamdulillah ñuy sant fii Cheikh Bamba tey ngir moo taxaw julli woon fa Ndar bañu sañ ko tey alhamdulillah ñuy sant fii Cheikh Bamba tey ngir moo taxaw julli woon fa Ndar bañu sañ ko tey laajal France Maroc woon ba jëkk tanan nu xool leen Sëriñ Tuubaa da ngeen ko ñàkk alhamdulillah ñuy sant fii Cheikh Bamba tey ngir moo taxaw julli woon fa Ndar bañu sañ ko tey alhamdulillah ñuy sant fii Cheikh Bamba tey ngir moo taxaw julli woon fa Ndar bañu sañ ko tey laajal France Maroc woon ba jëkk tanan nu xool leen Sëriñ Tuubaa da ngeen ko ñàkk alhamdulillah ñuy sant fii Cheikh Bamba tey ngir moo taxaw julli woon fa Ndar bañu sañ ko tey alhamdulillah ñuy sant fii Cheikh Bamba tey ngir moo taxaw julli woon fa Ndar bañu sañ ko tey laajal France Maroc woon ba jëkk tanan nu xool leen Sëriñ Tuubaa da ngeen ko ñàkk alhamdulillah ñuy sant fii Cheikh Bamba tey ngir moo taxaw julli woon fa Ndar bañu sañ ko tey alhamdulillah ñuy sant fii Cheikh Bamba tey ngir moo taxaw julli woon fa Ndar bañu sañ ko tey laajal France Maroc woon ba jëkk tanan nu xool leen Sëriñ Tuubaa da ngeen ko ñàkk alhamdulillah ñuy sant fii
mu dal jaari karamen Xuraysin ngir la mu callaloo ca ñun Xuraysin sax na mu julli ci ñaaru rakkaa ñaan ko boromam ngërëmal njool ma trop la taalif xasida ak asiiru ca maama Abdulaay Sëriñ Basiiru kaw ma nga taalif banaa xooloo ndawal borom nar woo ko mbar ma mu
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إليكم رسولا
Mr. Mbake is the National Director of the Global Solidarity Initiative, an international non-governmental organization based in Louisville, Kentucky. The goal of this NGO is to support the most vulnerable groups in Senegal, Mauritania, Mali, and Niger. His area of expertise is on children who attend Quranic schools and who are sometimes perplexed by child beggars or street children. Through his Khidma initiative, he collaborates with Quranic teachers and policymakers of the aforesaid states to provide health, shelter, food, and clean water to children in need. So let me show you the video for 7 minutes, and then you can ask your question directly. Okay? I think it works. Oh, can we turn the light off? Is that? Look. Is that okay?
GSI, which has been present for many years.
Mattress. Cheikh Bamba tey ngir moo taxaw julli woon fa Ndar bañu sañ ko tey alhamdulillah ñuy sant bi Cheikh Bamba tey ngir moo taxaw julli woon.
Global Solidarity Initiative, GSI, is a non-governmental organization created in 2012. GSI mission is to assist and serve vulnerable populations in the areas of education, health, and socio-economic empowerment. GSI, which has been present for many years in other African countries, designed and implemented the Khidma initiative in Senegal. The word Khidma, literally translated in Wolof by Jaamu Yàlla ci Jaamu Yàlla yi, means to serve the creatures for the love of God.
Khidma est une initiative intégrée. Khidma is an integrated community-based initiative that is currently implemented in the holy city of Touba by Global Solidarity Initiative, GSI, during its pilot phase, in view of gradual scaling throughout Senegal.
The Khidma initiative is made up of 3 programs. A program devoted to education called Khidma Daras, a program dedicated to health called Khidma Wear, a program oriented towards socio-economic empowerment called Khidma Tawfeex. A large number of Quranic schools, or daras, are struggling today to overcome the challenges they face: lack of resources, begging of young students called Taliban's children, lack of food, lack of health care, access to potable water, and subsequent lack of hygiene, etc. Added to this acute problem, other immoral actors who are abusing the practice they turn into their main source of revenues by exploiting the children students they send in the streets to beg. These perpetrators of child trafficking are sending on a daily basis these children in the streets of the big cities of Senegal to beg for money. Thousands of young children, some of whom are barely 3 years old, who are ill-dressed, barefoot, subject to all types of dangers and diseases, risking road accidents, prey of pedophiles and sexual delinquency, and potential terrorist recruits. A situation that portrays a very disastrous image of Senegal to visitors, while constituting a flagrant violation of laws protecting children. Given this highly detrimental situation for the country and the future of Taliban's children, it is self-evident that sustainable and structural solutions to the problems of the Daras cannot be found without a more active involvement at all levels of the Senegalese citizens.
This is why Global Solidarity Initiative GSI has developed Khidma Daras program under the impetus and close collaboration of the religious leaders and the main actors of the Daras.
To achieve its objectives, Khidma Daras has put into place a package of services for the Daras and Taliban's children, which include Wainu Dara, that consists of school canteens of the daras, financed with autonomous resources coming from the community-based sponsorship of Taliba's children. Its first outcomes are compelling. Since they are currently benefiting from the daily meals provided by Wanyu daras, all the daras sponsored by the pilot program, under the supervision of the League of Quranic Masters Associations in Senegal, have agreed to immediately put an end to the begging of their boarding students.
li nga xam ne moo doonoon suñu jafe-jafe bi gën a rëy mooy ñàkk mën a dundal donga yi te mënuñoo ñàkk jàngale nag alquran loolu nag kuréel gi ma wax léegi muy xidma liggéey bi ñu ci taxawee ñoom te bëgg koo jàppale daara ji moo wóotu leen ci wàllu googu muy wàllu dund tàmbalee ko ci ndékki añ reer bi kuréel gi dugg see ci daara ji ba léegi yëg nañ ni loolu lu am solo la ci liggéey bi nuy def mooy donga yi génnatuñ delluwaan ndékki génnatuñ delluwaan añ génnatuñ delluwaan reer ndax yooyu yëpp mu ngi leen di fekk ci biir barab bi loolu nag dañuy gën a may muy gañe waxtu yu bari loolu it masha Allah feeñ na bu baax a baax ci njàng mi feeñ ne ci yar bi kon loolu ñu ngi leen ciy sant bu baax te di leen ci gërëm.
GSI started another project to provide drinking water to the daras of Touba and to commercialize potable water under the label Nei Dara. The proceedings of this sale will be used to empower the daras and to financially support school canteens. The ongoing project of geolocalized mapping of the daras of Touba is being carried out in collaboration with the League of Quranic Master Associations in Senegal. Once it has been deployed in the other regions of Senegal, this project will generate a reliable database of all daras in the country and serve as a real-time measuring tool in the decision-making process for public and religious authorities.
Le projet en cours. In addition, a project to enroll Taliban children from Touba in the Universal Health Coverage Program is being implemented with the support of the Universal Health Coverage Agency. Furthermore, GSI has introduced a plea in this respect in order to increase the CMU state subsidy that benefits the vulnerable group of Taliban children, which will be complemented by community-based sponsorship.
With the support of all Senegalese citizens, public authorities, development partners, and all supporters, Hidma Daras is dedicated to help solve one of the major challenges facing the Senegalese society today, the begging of Taliban's children.
Pour sauver des vies, to save a life, to bring smile back on a child's face, there is no small contribution. Small water drops put together form the biggest oceans. Therefore, it is only through organized synergy and efforts of everyone that we can move boundaries and give a better future to those innocent kids.
But you have African Greek leaders like Sheikh Mohammed Bamba, who went to those primary schools. I think it's fantastic to know better about this. Any question? Any question? All right, so thank you, Sayyid Aziz, for sharing this video with us. Now, our next speaker is Dr. Babakar Mbaye. He teaches Islamic Studies and History at DePaul University and in Chicago, and at the Religious Studies and History departments at DePaul University. He also teaches Islam, politics, and international relations at Loyola University in Chicago. Dr. Meng received his PhD in Arabic and Islamic Studies at Cheikh Anta Diop University in Dakar, Senegal. He has also received degrees from other universities, including Sorbonne Nouvelle in Paris and University of Cambridge in England. He is the author of many articles, some of them comparing American and Islamic laws of contracts, Islamic finance, and Islam in Africa. Today, his presentation is on the Muridiyya Sufi order through a book written by Serigne Bassirou Bakke, a son of Cheikh Ahmadou Bamba. The title of Dr. Meng's presentation is Min al-Baqi al-Qadim fil Sirat al-Sheikh al-Qadim, as a source for understanding the Muridiyya movement and the study of Islam in the late 19th and early 20th century. Yes. So, Dr. Meng, you have the floor. Thank you.
Fandar bañu sañ ko tey laajal France Maroc woon ba jëkk
Thank you very much. It's very humbling to be here. So I'd like to focus my talk on a very important work within the Muridiyya movement, which actually was composed by Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba's own son, Sheikh Muhammad Bashir. So, من الباقي القديم في سيرة الخديم في سيرة الشيخ الخديم as a source of understanding the Muridiyya movement and the study of Islam in the late 19th and early 20th century at Senegambia. I would like to first start by introducing the Muridiyya as a movement, where I would offer a very brief but summarized, history of the movement, by saying that the Muridiyya was founded in central Senegal in 1883, at a time when the French colonial enterprise was in full swing. Most locally organized armed resistance to colonial penetration in Senegal was either defeated or weakened by the French colonial administration, who was frantically working to establish its colonial empire in West Africa. In the meantime, the colonial administration grew very wary of any indigenous social movement, whether religious or non-religious, that could be an obstacle to its colonial ambitions. The rise of Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba Mbacké as a charismatic Muslim erudite and the rallying around his personality of former leaders of the anti-colonial movement raised the fears of the expanding French colonial administration. Despite his goodwill gesture in assuring the French colonial administration that he was not interested in armed resistance, he ended up nonetheless being taken into exile, first in Gabon, in Central Africa, more than 2,000 miles away from his native Senegal in 1895, then in Mauritania in 1903, and in northern Senegal in 1907. He was then placed under house arrest in central Senegal until his death in 1927. One of the main objectives of these repeated banishments was to disrupt and disband the community that Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba was building as a counter-model both to the pre-colonial local ruling elites on the one hand and the occupying colonial authorities on the other. The repeated banishment of the founder of the Murid and the numerous attempts of the colonial administration to disperse his followers would a priori be detrimental to the Muridiyya project. Instead, indeed, as a model of Sufism that focuses intensely on the notion of tarbiyah, which is basically a form of Islamic education that requires a close spiritual and deontological mentoring, the Muridiyya social-religious project depended on a particularly close relationship between the teacher and the student. Despite the French policy, the Muridiyya grew even stronger and became a major pole of attraction, especially as many in the West African region were in search for alternatives to the aging traditional models of governance on the one hand and the expanding French colonial order on the other. Now to speak a little bit about our theme, which is basically the Minan al-Baqi. Minan al-Baqi al-Qadim fi Sira al-Shaykh al-Khadim, or bounties of the everlasting, the eternal God, about the life of the teacher, the servant. And we all know that one of the title, and the title he's known for, of Sheikh Ahmad Bamba is Khadim al-Rasul, meaning the servant of the Prophet. So the servant here is, ellipse for servant of the Prophet. But it was written by Muhammad Bashir Mbake. That work figures, if not among the first biographies of Sheikh Ahmadu Bamba, the founder of the Murid order, at least among the most comprehensive works dedicated to the life of this important personality of Islam in the 20th century and beyond. Certainly, there have been other biographies of the founder of the Muridiyah, including Muhammad Al-Amin Job of Dagana, Muhammad Al-Amin Job in Dagana in northern Senegal, with his work Irwan al-Nadim min Adb al-Khadim, or Sheikh Mukhtar bint Allah's Chronicles, another important follower of Bamba, who also have documented his encounters, but also the experience of Sheikh Ahmad Bamba, especially in Mauritania. Abdullah al-Kamlili's Al-Nafashat Al-Miskiya min Al-Wariq Al-Bakkiya, which is basically another also important biography devoted to the life of Sheikh Ahmadu Bamba. But it is true that Sheikh Muhammad Bashir Mbake's work stands out through its holistic approach to not only the life of Sheikh Ahmadu Bamba, but also through its comprehensive approach to Islam in the late 19th, 20th, and early 20th century central Senegambia. And when we say Senegambia here, we mean that region that only includes Senegal, but today's Gambia as well. So, a division that actually would not occur until later on, when due to colonization, part of the Senegal would be under French rule and the Gambia under British or English rule. So the author of Minan al-Baqi was himself a son of Sheikh Ahmad Bamba. He was born in 1895, the year when Sheikh Ahmad Bamba left for exile in Gabon. So it is arguably an important source for the political history of the sub-region. In this presentation, we would like to discuss some of the important aspects of Islam in the late 19th century Senegambia, especially through the prism of the Minan al-Baqi. There is much to learn about Sufism in the Senegambia through Sheikh Muhammad Bashir's work. Contrary to the prevalent dichotomy often drawn between a legalistic form of Islam and Sufi Islam, it is clear in the work of Sheikh Muhammad Bashir that Sufism, or Tasawwuf as it is known in Arabic, is conceived as an integral part of what is often called normative Islam, so, at least in the Senegambia. Rather than being opposed to normative Islam, Sufism is rather seen as its perfection. So basically here we keep in mind those triptych or those made of Islam, basically the idea of Islam as composed as Islam as a normative establishment, but also the notion of Iman, which actually is that, inculcation of that belief, and then ultimately, Iman or Ihsan, which is represented here by Sufism, which is basically the perfection or the excellence that actually is basically sought after by, those who engage in, Sufi pursuits, generally speaking. So, there is no established tradition in the region in Senegambia of engaging into Sufi education and practices without a prior understanding of the norms as encapsulated in the fiqh or jurisprudence. Young West African Muslims were therefore first expected to study the Quran, then proceed to study jurisprudence, in this case Maliki jurisprudence, where they would study textbooks such as Risala, Al-Akhdari, among other textbooks, possibly take on the study of what they call the complementary disciplines called mutimmat, that might include rhetoric, metric, among other disciplines. All the while, the young people, the young Muslims are exposed to what is called adab, which is basically a form of Islamic etiquette, where basically the young person is, inculcated with norms of behavior in public, but also behavior toward the Lord, toward God, generally speaking. Because while there is understanding that the first line of adab, of etiquette, should be toward God, toward Allah. And as Sheikh Ahmadu Bamba wrote in one of his, works, showing adab to God means, obeying God. That is basically following God's command and, staying away from His prohibition. So basically, a very important aspect of the Sufism, as we will see, of the education, as it is actually practiced within the region. So basically, as a discipline, Sufism comes as a jewel, a type of a coronation, a type of a crown that actually would perfect, basically, the individual who actually would be prepared, with all of these disciplines that have been, learned before to that, ultimate, basically, journey to that ultimate process. Until recently, therefore, the tension that seems to have characterized the relationship between the practitioners of Sufism and the legalistic or the legalists, in many parts of the Muslim world, evaded much of West Africa. So generally speaking, West Africa was quite, immune from the type of tension we've seen in other parts of the world between, that tense relationship, between Sufism on one side and what we call normative or legalistic Islam. So even the 19th century movement of jihad that appeared in the region, well, I think our earlier speaker, Dr. Kamara, mentioned the jihad of Sheikh El Hajj Umar, but also there were other, including the jihad of Usman Dan Fodio in the Sudan, but also Mahba. These are movements that actually were not stranger to Sufism, in that they were grounded for the most part in the Sufi tradition. So from that perspective, the dichotomy really did not, emerge as a problem as we've seen it, elsewhere in the Muslim world. So Sheikh Mohammed Bashir's Sheikh Mohammed Bashir structured his work about his famous teacher and father around a number of qualities, 9 to be exact, representative each of a certain status or Sufi status, what we call maqama. So basically within the Sufi experience. So the qualities that he used, for example, to write the book are the following: what he called tawbah, repentance, sabr, patience, shukr, gratitude, raja, hope, khawf, fear, zuhd, asceticism, tawakkul, reliance on God, rida, contentment, and love, mahabba. So these are themes that he has used to basically structure his work. So basically, as he is focusing on this personality of Sheikh Ahmed Bamba, that actually was, in his view, the perfect way to basically give a sense of his, being of this, important personality altogether. The work follows a pattern developed in one of the earliest manuals of tawassuf or tasawwuf, known as Qut al-Qulub, which is basically one of the earliest manual of Sufism, composed in the 10th century by someone named Abu Talib al-Makki. So basically one of the earliest, even earlier than, the most known text, book that we know. It is understood that this manual inspired better known works of Sufism, such as Ihya Ulum al-Din, which is composed, as we know, by Al-Ghazali, the 11th century Muslim scholar. Muhammad al-Bashir, and he, in his Minan al-Baqi, contrasts these two prominent works, the Qut al-Qulub on one side, and the basically Ihya Ulum Din of Al-Ghazali, by quoting the famous scholar Abu Hassan al-Shazili, for whom al-Qut imparts light, enlightens, while the Ihya imparts knowledge. So basically a contrast that he's making, putting his preference over that notion of enlightenment that actually the Qut really provides. Qut al-Qulub was also influential in the works of other Sufi masters such as al-Suhrawardi, Ibn al-Arabi, and al-Rumi, all from the 13th century. Important, just to come back a little bit on the Minan al-Baqi, important life experience of Sheikh Ahmadu Bamba have been narrated in Muhammad al-Bashir's work, including the author's personal experience with the founder of the Muridia. So basically, we know that, yes, he was born the year his father was taken into exile. But he actually gave us full detail about his encounter. And there's the sense that, well, he actually spent 20 years with his father. And those personal encounters have been narrated in the Minan al-Baqi alongside, other, experiences just actually was narrated by his, brothers, such as, Sheikh Muhammad Mustafa and others, So here a very close description of, the life experience of Sheikh Ahmad Bamba by one of his, son, who actually did never, and we'll come back to that, see himself as a son, but rather as a disciple, and that actually is a trait that he put over any other form of relationship, as we will see. It is quite remarkable that throughout the work, the author almost never mentions his relationship with Sheikh Ahmad Bamba. He always addresses him as Shaykhuna. That's the word he usually used to address Sheikh Ahmad Bamba, our teacher, This is much in line with the philosophy of the Muridia as developed by Sheikh Ahmad Bamba in the master-disciple relationship, which is given, priority over any form of familiar relationship, or basically including filial relations, One aspect of, to come back a little bit on, Sufism in the Senegambia, one aspect of Senegambian Islam that is often overlooked is an affiliated form of Sufism that seems to have deep roots in the region. So before we speak of Sufism in the form of turuq, that is, Sufi orders such as, the Qadiriya, the Shaziliya, the Tijaniya, and among others, it is actually, according to certain documents, that known that, well, especially in the Senegambia, there have been a tradition of what is called fuqara, basically those who actually see themselves as mere servants of God and are generally very, very inclined toward living modest life that actually do not really attach them to anyone but God, And it is true that we can see that in the writing, for example, of an earlier writer. So going back to an earlier text, for example, such as the Mi'raj al-Su'ud, which was written by Ahmed Baba, the scholar of Timbuktu, in the late, 15th, early 16th century. There is a sense that in what is called Jolof, which is basically the name used for Senegambia back then, there is a widespread tradition of memorizing the Quran. So that was one thing that Ahmed Baba really mentioned, but also the widespread tradition of fuqara, people who actually live that life of devotion to God, basically, as we will know it. This form of asceticism is more reminiscent of the early Sufism represented by figures such as Al-Halaj or Al-Junayd, We learn from the Minan al-Baqi that early in his life, Sheikh Ahmad Bamba had a lot of inclination toward those that the Minan call Ghuraba, he called them the strangers, or the, Abna as-Sabil, basically the wanderers. These are people who actually might look very modest in their demeanor, the way they appear, yet are very, very meaningful in terms of, their status toward God, which is basically that notion. There is a sense that in the Minan, that Sheikh Ahmad Bamba was very inclined toward basically interacting with these people. And basically, there is a sense even in the Minan that it actually is something that impacted him very well. Relationship which he's had with, those who are called the Ghuraba and Fuqara, especially as mentioned in the, Al-Minan. So the work of Muhammad Bashir consistently highlights Sheikh Ahmad Bamba's lack of interest for any mundane activity, and especially any political pursuit. We know that, for example, that, he's seen all forms of political structure, basically, up close, and has, gotten that position of really divorcing himself from political pursuit and pursuing that path toward God, which actually ultimately is what he was best known for. One event in particular seems to have played a turning point in his decision to turn away from getting involved in political matters and worldly pursuits, that is which is the vile murder of two notable scholars, Muhammad ibn Fati and Ali Lo, two prominent scholars from the Nyambur, who actually he saw murdered by political leaders of that time. There is a sense in the Minan al-Baqi that actually witnessing that murder really even make him more determined to turn away from the mundane life and basically focus on God subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the lack of interest for any mundane pursuits also came up clearly in the narrative of Blaise Diagne, a famous West African political figure who actually came to visit Bamba, especially during the breakout of World War I. There was a sense that he came for the sake of recruiting troops who would actually be fighting on the side of the French against the German. So there's a sense, as described in the Minan al-Baqi, which actually goes into much details regarding that encounter, that Sheikh Ahmad Bamba did not really show much interest in those type of issues, the matters of politics and recruitment. What he did was instead refer Blaise Diagne to one of his senior disciples who actually would take care of that issue, and that actually was something that impressed much Blaise Diagne and his followers, as described in the Minan al-Baqi. So it is clear that throughout the examples provided by Sheikh Mohammed Bashir, Sheikh Ahmed Bamba ultimately sought to be independent from anything or anyone other than God. That was one of his, objectives. One anecdote that illustrates, that ultimate freedom is the narrative offered in the Minan al-Baqi about one woman in Jurbel, who actually was who actually regularly would send cold, sweet beverages, to Sheikh Ahmed Bamba in the form of ginger, beverages. And one day he actually decided to just send out for water from the well, and to that water he added salt and started drinking that water instead of the sweetened cold beverage. If you can imagine the heat in central Senegal. And that is one of the examples that he showed in his divorce for worldly pursuit and a certain independence from mundane goods, generally speaking. So here, as we can see, it is a vivid example offered by the Minan al-Baqi regarding Sheikh Ahmed Bamba's choice of, for example, pursuing the path of God instead of basically worldly or mundane pursuits, as we will see throughout the Minan. So just to conclude a little bit, the Minan al-Baqi is actually a very extensive work, but I think the type of scholarship that actually appear in the work, not only the fine Arabic that actually was used to write the work, to write the text, but also the wealth of information it contained, has sometimes been overall overlooked as a source of studying history and Islam in the West African region. And there is very much to learn, not only in the historical details that are actually being offered in the Minan al-Baqi, but also even to know Sufism better and also understand many of Sheikh Ahmed Bamba's writing, in the form of his verses, his qasaid. The Minan al-Baqi could be a formidable source to use basically to understand his mindset, but also his terminology as as an author. So from that perspective, I think it needs to be taken into consideration as far as the study of Islam in the West African region is concerned, but also as far as the study of Sufism overall in the world is concerned. Thank you for your attention.
Any questions?
Nice to see you.
Oh, John, it's a pleasure.
I would like to ask a question with regards to Minan, as we call it, which is a biography of Sheikh Ahmadu Bamba, written by one of his senior disciples. How do you see the style of the writing and the tone of the text? Because as I read the French translation, and in the introduction, it is mentioned somewhere as a way of criticizing the style of the author, which says that it's kind of very apologetical. There are a lot of apologies about the feats of the Sheikh and most of his achievements and spiritual elevation and so on and so forth. How do you find yourself and the expression and the tone and the style of the text?
Okay, I mean, I think that's a very interesting question. As far as I'm concerned, I've engaged and I've seen many places where the translation offered for that text is panegyric, which actually in itself speaks for itself. But as far as I'm concerned, I saw that Sheikh Mohammed Bashir has managed to the best possible way to keep a certain distance, by engaging the sources, that is, either individual sources, oral sources, but also textual sources, archive. So from that perspective, it is very difficult to basically say that, well, it is all about writing positive things about, Sheikh Ahmad Bamba, but I think these are texts that actually were backed by, for example, evidence, either personal narrative, of people who have encountered the Sheikh, or basically texts that actually are available in the market. So from that perspective, I think it might be a blanket, basically, statement or judgment that does not take into consideration factors such as the fact that, well, he might have been a member of the Muridiyah as himself, and on top of all, a disciple and a son of the person who's being described here. But there is generally a sense of objectivity in the way he approached his subject, and basically by offering time and time again evidence for whatever basically events that he's narrating. So that's my view, that's my personal view. And as far as the language is concerned, I see it has been quite clear and very, very fluid in terms of the Arabic that actually has been used, the quality. And so the quality of the language and the research really speak for themselves, in my view. That's my personal view.
Hi, thank you for that. I learned a lot. I just have a question about, I like your argument about Sufism being or seen as perfection of normative Islam. And I just have a quick question about the content of I guess the Sufis that you're talking about, that expression, what did they consider? What was the content of, if it's normative, then that suggests an accepted text or number of texts, right? And I think you touched on some of that in terms of 10th and 13th century manuals that were included in, I guess, what these people who were writing would consider to be texts with which they would engage or accept as an expression of normative Islam. So I'm just wondering, did that include, if I'm thinking about Islam as an intellectual tradition and not just a concern for conversion or religious expression, then did that include, let's just say, earlier texts of non-Sufi expressions back to Timbuktu, for example, or other centers of learning? Can you just tell me the content of this understanding of normative Islam?
Okay, generally speaking, when I speak of, thank you for another great question. Generally speaking, when I speak of normative Islam, what I have in mind is that Islam that actually has been established along the line of what is called the Sharia. And as we know, the Sharia here has been expressed in the form of the fiqh, which actually encapsulated the notion of legal Islam. So from that perspective, it has been the grounding for much of, generally speaking, what is usually called legalistic Islam. In that, well, here, especially in the form of the schools of jurisprudence that have emerged within the Muslim world by and large. So it is not uncommon to see a certain dichotomy, drawn between that form of Islam, legalistic, very, attached to the norm, versus a Sufi Islam which is more liberal. And I think that is a dichotomy that doesn't apply in the context of West Africa. In that, well, before being a Sufi, you have to be a jurist in the first place. And I think in the Minan al-Baqi, Sheikh Mohammed Bashir make it very clear when he say that it's actually better to be a faqih Sufi, that is a jurist Sufi, than to be a Sufi jurist, which means that, well, perfecting your legal training is actually a priority before engaging, basically into Sufism per se. So basically they don't lose sight of that necessity to ground themselves within the Sharia or the law before, perfecting their relationship with God. So, yeah.
So a round of applause for Dr. Ben. Thank you so much. So our last panelist is Sheikh Sufi. Sheikh Sufi earned a Bachelor of Science degree in Biology from St. Augustine College in Chicago and a Master of Science degree in Secondary Education from Indiana University. Since 1996, Sheikh Sufi has traveled to Senegal several times to study Sufism and to complete his training on that path of Islam. He has self-published books, given conferences, and have initiated people into the Muridiyya. He is the founder of the Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba Sufi School. Sheikh Sufi's talk is titled, "Who is Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba?" from a different angle, right? Yeah. Is that correct? Yes. All right, thank you, Sheikh Sufi. So you have the floor. And let me hand it to you. Oh, I can, all right? Can you want this? So it's better.
Should I go here or sit? Okay. Assalamu alaikum, peace and blessings. A'udhu billahi bismillahi inna waliyullahu Bakir Sirin Salihu. I want to thank everybody for coming out to learn about our beloved Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba. And in the words of Persian Sufi poet Hafiz, Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba and God are like two fat people in a little small room. If you could understand what I'm saying, Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba is a mystical figure in Islam who said that my teaching is from the Quran and the Sunnah. When we deal with Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba, he says in order to go into Sufism that you heard people talk about, Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba said you have to first study fiqh, Aqidah, and Tawheed before you go into the Tasawwuf or the esoteric teachings. So we want to make it clear that our teacher, Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba's teachings are based on Quran and Sunnah. Now, one of the main missions of Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba in West Africa was to bring back the dignity to the Africans. Because before Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba, there was a kind of inferiority complex in West Africa for sheikhs from an Arab country. And one of my teachers told me that before Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba came to Senegal, you could have taken an Arab from Mauritania who was an alcoholic who didn't know any Quran, bring him to Senegal, give him a bath and shave him, and people would have followed him because he was an Arab. But when Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba came, he destroyed the inferiority complex of the Africans for Arab sheikhs. And also, Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba was a very prolific writer. He wrote over 1,000 books. I know people say, wow, there's no way that Sheikh could have written over 1,000 books. Myself, I went to the library in Tuba to see his books because I was like, it's impossible. How did one man write over 1,000 books? There's a mystical story of Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba where Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba said to his disciples, when I'm writing, knock on the door before you come in the room where I'm writing. Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba told his disciples, when I'm writing my qasida, Bismillahi, Yanmuluhai, Bilamanahi, Walantihai, Hamdan li Rabbi, Kairu Murabbi, Qadra Makalbi, Biliktidai. This is one of Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba's writings, Mohibul Nafi. And Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba says, when I'm writing my qasides, knock on the door before you come in. There's a famous story that says, one time a disciple came into the room where Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba was writing. He saw 7 Sheikh Ahmadou Bambas with 7 pieces of paper and 7 pens, and they were all writing at the same time. And Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba looked up and came back into one body and explained to the disciple, this is why you should knock on the door before you come into the room where I'm writing. The history of Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba actually started with his mom. His mom was named Mam Jarabuso. Mam Jarabuso was a Quranic scholar who came from a generation of 7 generations of women that were all Hafiz of Quran. I don't know if you know what the word Hafiz means, but Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba's mother had the whole Quran memorized. And her mom had the whole Quran memorized. And her mom had the whole Quran memorized. So Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba came from a family of Quranic scholars, not just from the men, but also from the women. And Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba's mom was a wali, or what we call a saint in Islam. There's one famous prayer in Islam called the Dalail al-Khairat. Dalail al-Khairat is a Salatul Nabi, a prayer on the Prophet Muhammad that was written by Sheikh Jazuli in Morocco. And the Dalail al-Khairat is a prayer that takes 7 days to read. You read a section on Sunday, a section on Monday, a section on Tuesday, and you would finish it on Saturday. But Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba's mom was so deep in her worship, she would read the whole Dalail al-Khairat every day. She would read all 7 sections every day. So one of the statements that she made before Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba was born, his mom, Mam Jarabuso, made the statement in a Muslim country that is kind of controversial. His mom said, on the day of her wedding, it was a customary tradition in Senegal for the mother to give a speech before she left her father's house and went to the house of her husband. Listen to what Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba's mom said. She said, I know for a fact there's no prophet coming after the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. I know there's no prophet coming after the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But if there was another prophet coming, that prophet would be my son who's coming after I'm married. This is what she said before she got married. So she already had some prophetic ideology of who her son was going to be. And in another conversation, she said to his mom was the second wife of Mamour Antasali. I don't know if you know of the griot tradition. In West Africa, there's something called a griot tradition where there's oral stories of Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba. There's one poet named Musa Ka. I've seen it with my own eyes. He has over 1,000 90-minute cassette tapes telling the story of Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba. So what I'm telling today is just a small drop of water in the ocean of Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba. So Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba's mom again was talking to the first wife of Mamour Antasali. And Mamour Antasali's first wife said, do you see my son? She was trying to brag on her son because she didn't have a son yet. She said, do you see my son? My son is bright like the moon. Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba's mom said, okay, that's nice, alhamdulillah. But when my son comes, he's going to be bright like the sun. So I say that the waliyat, or the sanctity of Sheikh Ahmadu Bamba, came from his mom and his dad. In Senegal, they say the secret of the mother will show up in the child, okay? In Senegal, they say the secret inside the mother will show up in the child. So this is Sheikh Ahmadu Bamba. He came from a saintly family. Also, a lot of people don't know Sheikh Ahmadu Bamba is a descendant of Sheikh Abdul Qadir Jilani, and he's a Sharif. He's a descendant of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Sheikh Ahmadu Bamba's family were Sharifs that came from northern Senegal, or what they call the Pular tribe. If you look in Senegal, the majority of the walis, such as Sheikh Ahmed Tidiane Sy, Sheikh Ahmadu Bamba, and most of the walis in Senegal, or the saints, they came from one tribe called the Pular tribe, which was in North Africa. And a lot of these, Pular is also known in other countries as the Fulani tribe. A lot of the saints in West Africa came from that family, or that tribe, and Sheikh Ahmadu Bamba's mother and father were actually descendants of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There's so much I could say about Sheikh Ahmadu Bamba. And what I want to say for me is, what you see in the media as far as Islam is not what we consider Islam. Because our Sheikh Ahmadu Bamba, he says, Dini Hubullah, which means Islam, my religion, is the love of God. Sheikh Ahmadu Bamba is saying, Dini Hubullah, my religion is the love of God. And if you want to make somebody from Senegal laugh, I lived in Senegal for 2 years. I went to Senegal 8 times, stayed there for 2 years to study. If you want to make Brother Kadim Cisse laugh or Brother Sheikh Ahmadu Bamba laugh, all you have to do is go to them and say these Wolof words, Nar Yakna Dini. Can you say that? See, he's already laughing. He's already laughing. Nar Yakna Dini. It's a Wolof proverb that means the Arabs messed up our Islam. Nar Yakna Dini. Nar means Arab, Yakna means to destroy. So the media shows you an angry Muslim with a long beard screaming jihad, jihad, jihad. But I tell people, I don't care if his name is Muhammad. If he's committing acts of terrorism, he's not a Muslim. Because Sheikh Ahmadu Bamba said, the only jihad that is left is the inner jihad, jihad al-nafs. Our Sheikh Ahmadu Bamba said there's no more outer jihad. He said the only jihad that is left is the jihad al-nafs, or the war against your lower self. And to give some of the teachings of our Sheikh Ahmadu Bamba said, between man and God, there's only 4 enemies. Sheikh Ahmadu Bamba says, between you and Allah, God, there's only 4 enemies. And that would be McDonald's, Burger King, Taco Bell, and Pepsi. No, astaghfirullah. He didn't say that. Don't write that down. Sheikh Ahmadu Bamba said the 4 enemies between you and God are nafs, hawa, dunya, and shaitan. The 4 enemies, according to our Sheikh, are nafs, which is your lower self. And our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, the nafs on the inside is a worse enemy than 70 shaitan on the outside. Okay? So your lower self, or your nafs, according to our Prophet alayhi salam, he says the nafs, your lower soul, is a worse enemy than 70 devils on the outside. So who can tell me what's the first enemy that Sheikh Ahmadu Bamba said? Not McDonald's, what was it? Nafs, which is your lower soul. Then the next one he said is hawa, which is your passions and desires, okay? Hawa is passions and desires. The third one he said is dunya, or materialism. And the fourth one he said was the shaitan. So to summarize Sheikh Ahmadu Bamba's teaching, then I'll close. Once there was an old man who came to Sheikh Ahmadu Bamba, and the old man took his bayat, or his initiation, with Sheikh Ahmadu Bamba. And Sheikh Ahmadu Bamba told the old man, I know that you're up in age, so I'm going to give you my entire teaching in 4 dots. And Sheikh Ahmad Bamba told the old man, if you can follow these 4 dots, you can be my disciple and you can practice my way. Sheikh Ahmad Bamba then he drew 4 dots in the sand. 1, 2, 3, and 4. 1, 2, 3, 4 dots. Can you see the 4 dots? Sheikh Ahmad Bamba told the old man, the first dot at the top is what God has asked you to do. As far as like the Shariat, the Quran, and Hadiths, the first dot at the top is what Allah has commanded you to do. He said the second dot on the right is the things that you want in life. He said the dot at the bottom is what God told you not to do. Always Topendigel by Teddy. But Sheikh Ahmad Bamba said the dot at the bottom is what God told you not to do. And the dot on the left is the things you fear and the things you don't want to happen in life. Okay? Who can tell me the 4 dots before I tell you the significance? What's the first dot? What God tell you to do. What's this one? What you want in life. What's the bottom one? What not to do. Man, it's elementary, my dear Watson. And this one? What you fear. So Sheikh Ahmad Bamba told the old man, if you do what God wants you to do in the first dot, the things you want in your life will come to you. Clear. Sheikh Ahmad Bamba told the old man, if you do what God asked you to do, success, wealth, prosperity, family, money, they will come to you. And he told the old man, but if you do, he said, if you walk towards the second dot at the bottom, the things you don't want to life to happen, sickness, poverty, and illness, those things you don't want will come to you. So Sheikh Ahmad Bamba told the old man again, walk towards what God asked you to do, and the things you want in life will come to you. Do not, and he said, if you go towards what God told you not to do, the things you don't want in life will come to you. And this is our teaching of Sheikh Ahmad Bamba. Thank you for paying attention. Inshallah, try to research him and find out more, inshallah.
You can go over the microphone, see if they have questions, please.
So while Professor Jallo is walking away trying to take Dr.
Ahmadu Bamba's, is that what I mean? Yeah. What was so different about his style of teaching or just preaching that was able to destroy the inferiority complex that you mentioned regarding the Arabs?
What was his teaching that was able to destroy the inferiority complex? Sheikh Ahmad Bamba said, my miracle is my writings. So what destroyed the inferiority complex was actually his writings. One of my teachers was an Arab scholar named Abdullah Farmi. I studied with Abdullah Farmi over a course of 15 years in West Africa. He was from Tunisia. He was a disciple of Serene Salihu. Farmi told me that Sheikh Ahmad Bamba's miracle was his Arabic that he wrote. And this is what destroyed, one thing that destroyed the inferiority complex, because the Arabic that Sheikh Ahmad Bamba wrote was higher in scholarship and wisdom and knowledge than what was written by the previous scholars in Islam. To give an example, Sheikh Ahmad Bamba said, sometimes a light rainfall would precede a heavy downpour. Sheikh Ahmad Bamba said sometimes a light rainfall would precede a heavy downfall. And to give you an example of how high his writings were, or how high his writings are, I used to teach in an Islamic school in Philadelphia. I worked inside of the mosque teaching mathematics. And there was an English teacher from Egypt. She grew up in Egypt. Her mother tongue was Arabic. So I said, I want to see if what my teacher said about Sheikh Ahmad Bamba is true. I took the lady from Egypt, one writing, Muhaibul Nafi, Bismillahi Yamulahai. I took her one qasid of Sheikh Ahmad Bamba. Now, her native tongue is Arabic, remember. She grew up speaking Arabic, everything is... I gave her this writing from Sheikh Ahmad Bamba and said, excuse me, miss, this is from my Sheikh in West Africa. Your Arabic is better than mine, of course it was. Can you give me some translation of this writing? So I gave her the Muhaibul Nafi. She looked at it for about 10 minutes, was like, she was reading it. Where did you get this? I said, it's from my sheikh. I'm in the mosque. I have no reason to make this up. I said, it's from West Africa. She said, my brother, Abdullah, I'm a native Arabic speaker. She said, but what the sheikh is saying, I cannot translate it for you. She said, what he's saying, she said, I can only get the gist or the meaning, but you have to take this to a scholar or the alim for them to translate it. She said, I'm an Arabic speaker, but I cannot translate it. And that was just one of his writings. So I think that what he wrote brought a lot of positive influences to the Senegalese people. But one historical fact, Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba's second exile, they exiled him to Mauritania because there was a lot of Arab scholars and sheikhs in Mauritania, and the French thought, okay, now he has a lot of African followers in Senegal. If we send him to Mauritania with the Arabic scholars and the scholars who are Arabs, then he'll lose his superiority, and his followers will say, oh, he's not that high of a sheikh. He's under the Arab sheikhs in Mauritania. But the plan backfired because Sarsara, when Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba went to Mauritania, the Arab sheikhs came to test him. And after they tested him, they all submitted to Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba and became his disciples. And when the Arabs in Mauritania became disciples of Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba, it spread like wildfire through the Islamic world. There's an African sheikh that has Arab disciples. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. So people from all over the world started coming to Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba. Even people from Mecca and Medina, they came to Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba after they found out that the Arab scholars and sheikhs in Mauritania submitted to him and became his disciples. So that one historical event eradicated any self-esteem issues from the African Muslims in Senegal. That's a very good question. Peace be with you.
I wanted to say that your explanation is clear and precise. I understood what you were trying to refer to. I understand also that the writings that the prophet wrote were in parables. And a parable is something that has multiple meanings. That's why the young lady could not decipher what was being said.
And one thing that they say in Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba said, the Holy Quran is the mother of my writings. Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba said, the Holy Quran is the mother of my writings. And they say in Senegal that the Holy Quran is like rice that's not cooked. Can you eat rice that's not cooked?
No.
No. They say in Senegal, the Holy Quran is like rice that's not cooked. But the qasid of Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba is like rice that's cooked with seasoning, salt, maggi, and pepper and spices on it. Meaning that you may be, he's laughing, he knows, Lole Wak Fofde, Lole Wakde. That's what they say. Meaning, sometimes the meanings in the Quran, you might not be able to digest it. It's too deep. They're for these. But Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba, I'm going to tell you something that'll blow your mind. It's 6,666 verses in the Quran. 6,666 verses in the Quran. Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba wrote a poem, a qasid, for every verse in the Quran. So you could almost say some of his writings are tafsir of Quran to where is one writing, wa kana haqqan alayna nasrul mu'minin. Wa kana haqqan alayna nasrul mu'minin is a verse in Quran that says Allah promises to help the believers. But he took that verse in Quran and wrote a poem from that verse, and it's just incredible what you can get from reading Arabic in the writings of Sheikh Ahmad Bamba. Sorry for taking up too much time.
Thank you.
We have probably 15 minutes left, and then we will have the concluding remarks by Hassan Bamba, who is the cultural secretary of, what is the name? Association, the Murid Confederation in America, right? You can come here if you want.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وخديمه وأمته وسلم تسليما. In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, may the peace and blessings of the Almighty Allah be unto our Prophet Muhammad, his worthy companions, and the entire Ummah indeed. I greet you in the words of Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May the peace and the blessings of the Almighty God be unto you. And I want to thank our host, Dr. Samba Diallo. Please show him some love, Doctor. This is the second time I'm witnessing a very warm welcome and informative where we can come together and share ideas about our common humanity. And that's what life is all about. All we want is just the ability to worship our Almighty God and have a living, a meaningful living, and raise our children if we have some, right? If we don't, we have the plan to have some family of some sort someday. And Dr. Diallo has shown a leadership that I haven't seen in a long time throughout this country. I want to thank Senator Abdulaziz Mbake for his initiative to help us explain what learning the Quran should be about, which is to learn the Word of God, be educated, be brought up to be a world citizen. So thank you for what you do, and may Allah bless you and help you. I want to thank Dr. Ababakar Mbeng. He gave a short talk and summarized what Imam Abu Talib al-Makki wrote about Qutul Qulub, and he reconciled it with what Imam Abu Hamid al-Ghazali wrote and said that one spoke to our heart and the other one, plugged from there, spoke to our heart, but then spoke also to our mind, so that we can decipher what Sufis are saying that are in parables that we cannot understand fully. Imam Ghazali was the one that was instrumental in explaining what Islam is about, and the dialogue with the philosophers of his time, and other thinkers. What I would like to do in conclusion is simply to tell you why we are here. What is the genesis of us coming to St. Louis? Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba was summoned in 1895 by the then French colonialist in Dakar, in St. Louis of Senegal, and along with about 80 clergymen, and all of them were tasked to pledge their allegiance and their devotion to the French colonialist. Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba was among those that were summoned to St. Louis. When he came in, what he did first was to throw his prayer rug and pray 2 units of prayer inside the palace of the governor. Then when it was his time to sign his name on the roster, he put in Surah Al-Ikhlas, which reads, قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ Allahu Samad, Lam Yalid, Walam Yulad, Walam Yakul Lahu Kufuwan Ahad. My signature is to say that there is one God, which is Allah. He is the one, He is the mighty. He doesn't have a son, nor is he doesn't beget, nor is he begotten. And there is none like unto him. That's what he wrote as his signature. So the French colonialists knew that this is the man they were looking for and had to put him through a summary trial of some sort without any due process. And for the next 32 years of his life, he endured a deportation to the jungles of Gabon. A professor talked about it. Then in 1902, after he survived that climate of tropical Africa, for someone that was below the Sahara Desert for 7 years, could not suppress his life, a firing squad, survival, etc., all the elements, and the humiliation to go with it, was brought back to Senegal in 1902 and then to Mauritania. The young sister asked, how did he manage to teach us to be who we are and respect ourselves, and yet respect all mankind, celebrating our common humanity? So Mauritania was, if we cannot kill this guy, this man, maybe if we take him to those that are of a complexion that is a little bit clearer, he's going to lose his disciples due to a complex of inferiority. They speak Arabic. Most of Senegal do not. They are closer in skin color to the Prophet Muhammad. Maybe this way we can just little by little chip away at his populace so that he can come back to Senegal alone. Abdullah Saleh said it when he said our Sheikh, when he proves himself, had those shuyukh, those sheikhs of Mauritania pledge allegiance to him. They wrote volumes about his qualities as a human being, his qualities as a man of God. One of them said, that if Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba has a default, it is that he is a mercy to mankind. That's what I know of him. If he's got any shortcoming, it is simply to be useful to the entire human race. And then the colonialists lost hope again and brought him back to Senegal in 1907. Then they took him under house arrest in a region that is hot and secluded and a hard terrain to traverse to get to him. Regulated how many visits he can get in a day. And when you came to see him also, what did you bring for the Sheikh? They had to tally up your donation to him for the cause of Islam. That didn't work. Then in 1912, he was brought to a city named Jurbel, where they had him under house arrest until he ascended to heaven. This is someone who, simply because he said, I will fight my jihad with fear of Allah, reverence to the Almighty God, and knowledge, I will not kill even a fly, endured 32 years of his life under affliction until he passed away in 1927. When everything was said and done, he said, عفوت عن الأهداء طرا لوجه من نفاهم لغيري سرمدا لست أدفع. I forgive all of my enemies who attempted to my life, separated me from my family and my loved ones. I forgive them for the sake of the Almighty God who fended them off without me resorting to weapons to defend myself. This is the epitome of nonviolence. Then to the colonialists, after they knew that this is someone who had the last stations of what Dr. Mbengue was talking about, those 9 stations of Sufism, think about the last 3. When he said, Raja, you have your hope in God, your sustenance, you count on God to help you sustain yourself. Then he talked about Rida. Do you thank Allah, do you thank God for what you have? And not worry about your tomorrow, trusting in God and just doing what you need to do, which is try to earn a living honestly and be useful to your fellow human being. Then the last one that says Mahabba, your love. for God. When you love God, you don't hurt God's creation. You don't hurt God's servants. Ahmadu Bamba, when he prayed to the Almighty, and he said, Ya Malik al-Mulk, Ya Man Jalan Qawadin, O Lord, the honor of and master of all kings. And Allah says, stop. From here, anything you ask me, I will give you. And he said, Irham Jami' al-Wara, Ya Hadi Rada'a, have mercy on all mankind. If this is not love, I don't know what is. Again, to the colonialists, he said in his famous book, Jazbul Qulub, Bihi ghanina lil jinan an ghazwatin wa an hawan. Bihi lana taba zaman ma qabul qidami. It is my understanding of Islam, a deep understanding of it, which is nothing like violence and has all to do with helping your fellow human being, that I have not to resort to a war, or not only I don't need to get weapons to defend myself, but I don't need either to surrender my personality, to surrender my God-given dignity. And my work for Allah is approved of. Those 2 rakats that he prayed in St. Louis, we had the idea in 2002 to go see his youngest son, Sheikh Muhammadu Murtada, in New York City, where he was being hosted at the United Nations, and said, because the French colonialists dominated Senegal, and St. Louis of Senegal was their capital, they also used to own St. Louis of the United States of America, until the Louisiana Purchase. Y'all remember that? So we would like the permission to celebrate his non-violence, his understanding of Islam in St. Louis every 5th September, since that is the day in 1895 that he was wrongly accused and taken to exile simply for benefiting mankind. Couldn't we celebrate? So this is our 15th edition that we are here, welcomed by you all, and we can't thank you enough. Sheikh Ahmadu Bamba said it best, just like his namesake, he was a mercy to mankind. We are being hosted throughout the states. We do at least 9 states, from the State Department to mayor's offices. They issue proclamation to bear witness to what he did for mankind and want us to come share our example of our common humanity, helping one another and avoiding what is destructive to all and to all religion, which is violence. I thank you and look forward to working with you in the upcoming years. May the Almighty God continue to bless and protect all of us. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you so much, Hassan. Now I declare the conference closed. So thank you all for coming. And if you have time, you have to see the exhibition going on if you want to get a look. Thank you so much. Right?